Hello, welcome to the Why God Why podcast. We are brought to you by Browncroft Community Church. We are part of the Lumavaz network of podcasts through Saddleback Church. We exist to respond to the questions you don't feel comfortable asking in church. I am here with our remarkable producer, Nathan Yoder, and my fantastic friend and co-host, Aaron Mercer.
Thanks, Peter. It's good to be on here with you.
I know.
I'm excited about our conversation today.
I know. We have an in-person conversation about artificial intelligence.
And it's the real conversation. We're not just having some algorithm do the talking for us. It's for real. In case you're not watching online, you might just be listening and wondering.
Yeah, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your podcast network, we are doing the question, why is there spiritual significance to AI, artificial intelligence? I am glad to have Chayton Kona, who actually attends Browncroft and works in this sector. And so we're looking forward to have a fun conversation. Aaron, what do you think before we throw it to Chayton?
No, I think this is going to be a great conversation. Chayton, I really appreciate you being on here. It's just a blessing to have you and have your insights here. I mean, artificial intelligence, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot nowadays. But I think, if there are a lot of people like me, probably wonder, what does that mean and what do you do with it? I've looked a little bit into it, but even for me, I kind of feel like, whoa, what do we do with this idea of machine learning, deep learning, whatever? I don't even know. Are we talking about iRobot here? The Will Smith movie? I don't know. What do we do with this? So I think it's going to be fun. But anyways, yeah, Chayton, we really appreciate you being here, and would love to. I mean, Peter, do you want to just let Chayton get a little brief about him first before we get into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Tell us your story.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on, guys. And, I ran into Peter in the hallway a couple Sundays ago, and he mentioned that a number of people from my small group have been on here. So, of course, I then immediately started binge listening to the episodes that my small group compatriots. It's a weird experience to be on a plane and listening to friends of yours on a podcast, and their voice comes through so remarkably, clearly. So, again, pleasure to be here. Artificial intelligence is a fast-moving topic, right? But, you asked a little bit about me, right? So I first started attending Browncroft in 1997. I was probably 21 years old and, have been here, I guess it's been over 25 years, right, since then. And so, have the joy and privilege of being in a small group with a number of other people that attend here. I also serve in children's ministries. So it's been a wonderful journey, meeting a number of wonderful people, yourselves included, in that journey. And for me, I first came to faith attending a Christian elementary and high school in Connecticut, which is where I'm from. And I started there primarily because where I lived, probably on the wrong side of the tracks, right? And so public schools weren't really a particularly great option, at least viewed by my parents. And so it was viewed more as what's the best education I can give my child, as opposed to more of a like kind of a religious or spiritual driven reason. But, I got that along for the ride, and I'm very glad that I did. I'm eternally blessed that I did. And so that was really the start of my faith journey.
Oh, wow. Well, we're probably going to jump in a little bit more of your personal story with this, but let's just talk about this. I first saw, you're like a big deal on LinkedIn. You probably won't say that. I will. And I saw all these searches, notifications about Chayton Kona on AI. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this sector of the marketplace and just how you've landed where you are today.
Sure. Well, certainly there are a lot of people that know more about AI than I do, right? I'm blessed to be able to work alongside a lot of very talented people, a lot of people that are on, the cutting edge of the trends and technology. For me, a lot, my role is really to take technology and apply it to certain applications. In my particular case, a lot of industrial, a lot of medical, a lot of smart city type applications. And so there's a lot of AI that's used in a lot of those applications. And so that's kind of where I've intersected that whole field.
Can you drill down a little bit, maybe give us an example of we hear AI, we hear artificial intelligence. I mean, what would be your basic definition of that? And then as a follow-up to that, what's some place where the average person would interact with artificial intelligence and might not even know it every day?
Absolutely, Aaron. Yeah. So, I mean, we have lots of interactions with AI all throughout, and AI has a lot of different terms, right? Artificial intelligence, you hear machine learning, deep learning. This is really a new style of algorithm that has emerged over, it's actually been around for many, many decades, but really come into prominence. And I think a lot of the drivers for that is the amount of computing horsepower that we all have, right? I mean, I think we've all heard the story that the amount of computing capability that we carry in our pockets in the form of our phones these days, far exceeds the biggest mainframes from a few decades ago, right? And so with this sort of explosion of computing, there's now new ways to go ahead and execute and develop certain algorithms, and certainly AI, as we know it today, is a way of that. But I mean, there's also a marketing aspect to it, right? People love to call everything AI because I think right now there's a trend toward maybe you get more business interest or your stock valuation goes up, right? If you're dealing in AI, kind of like for those of us old enough, right, that were around at the turn of the century with internet, right? People put I in everything because they wanted to show the financial community that they were a progressive company. Even some things that we take for granted right now, like the original iPod was there, that I was there for internet enabled. And so in technology marketing circles, right, you'll see people tend to latch onto these big megatrends. But in truth, to answer the other part of your question, there is a lot of AI that we use on a day-to-day basis. We may and may not know it, right? It extends to things like our Spotify playlist, to Netflix recommendations, to natural language processing, which is used with like Siri or Google or Alexa, where I can say something, and we're all here in the Northeast, but obviously, our friends from, the down south or people that speak an entire different language, right? The algorithms have to basically understand what they're saying and, produce a proper response. And so AI is used in all of those things.
Interesting.
And we hope that you're using your Alexa devices to listen to the Why God Why podcast by Browncroft Community Church. So that turns it on. So let me just have some fun because we're friends. So I feel like there's two things like that you probably get asked all the time. Number one, Big Brother's always listening to us. And then number two, the robots are going to take over. So from someone that kind of works in the field, just process with us how you kind of engage that. Because obviously you're seeing the benefits. You're probably seeing some other things. But how would you kind of talk with people as someone that's on the inside as opposed to the outside?
Sure. Well, I would say first and foremost, as we stand here in early 2023, we are a long way away from robots taking over the world and making slaves of all of us. So, now with that said, the progression of technology, especially in the field of AI, is growing rapidly, right? And so even though we're far away from it today, right, if someone's listening to this in 5 years or 10 years, we may be, significantly, closer to that. But I think there's a couple different things that we have to kind of keep in perspective. Number one, I oftentimes like to take a sanity check, right, from certain technologies out there. We all drive vehicles, right? And obviously autonomous driving is a hot topic these days, right? And from people that are, live in those circles, know that making a self-driving car is very, very difficult. And actually someone once told me, the more I learn about self-driving cars, the less I'm convinced it's happening anytime soon. And so a lot of the same sort of AI processing is involved in that. And so, if someone doesn't know how to safely make a left turn at an intersection, I feel pretty comfortable that I'm not going to be enslaved by that thing because I'm just going to take left-hand turns all the time and run away from it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's funny. Well, I mean, obviously that's definitely something, in the popular mind, people wonder about that. Or, even if it's as simple as computers can start to lock you out of things or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that you mentioned the driving, but there's certainly other things I know people are wrestling with or thinking about now. There's a lot of, just to jump off of Peter's question, I mean, there's concerns about deep fakes and things like that, or we were talking before we started the podcast about the chat. What was that? What Chat GPT?
Yeah, Chat GPT. It's a very popular AI model that's used for a variety of different things. We were talking about a legislator that actually developed legislation to regulate AI using AI, which is an interesting, kind of break your mind sort of concept. But no. I mean, I think first and foremost, I mean, I think privacy and human rights comes first. And I do think that as new technology evolves, there comes a point in time, and I think the time is now or very, very soon, that, we are going to need some regulations put in place because, gone unchecked, you can do a lot of things, right? I mean, I may be searching for how to improve my Microsoft Excel skills, with AI. Somebody else might be searching for, how to take over a small country using AI, right? So there's a lot of different uses.
So on that, like, I guess maybe to go a little further on, I mean, I think we can always have people, you can always think of worst case scenarios about any technology that's developing, but then there's often a lot of pluses that maybe we're not even thinking about yet. Where do you see the most promise with what is happening in AI right now? What are you excited about on things that it can help people with?
Well, especially from my perspective, I think some of the biggest benefits of AI come in the areas of healthcare, right? I think that technology should be used to help people. And what better way to help people than, in the field of medicine and people's health and improve the quality of their lives and help them live longer. And so I think that, you see lots of advancements in AI to help double check doctors, right? To make sure that they don't miss something that they might otherwise, mistake for something else, or, whether it be false positive or false negatives. So I think that there's a lot that can be done there, but there's also a lot that can be done to improve the quality of day-to-day life. I mean, again, let's not discount the ability to be able to ask Siri, what's the weather tomorrow, or, be able to be turned on to a new band because you like a particular type of music and you get a suggestion for something else. So the little things add up, but also there's the potential for some very, very big things.
So I've been thinking about this more than I thought I would, which is surprising to me because we have a couple friends of the podcast, Neil Smith and Aaron Magnuson. They do the Church Social Media podcast, and they've been talking a lot about AI. And there's another guy named Kenny Jing. And, so these are kind of the things that I'm struggling with. And I actually look to both of you because people don't know, like, Aaron has a whole website about, like, communications. So I want to throw that out there. But so I understand, like, even with this podcast, I use an app called Headliner. Headliner actually creates it's a audiogram clip that it just takes it from, like, about an hour after this episode goes live, it's going to create that. And so people think that I spent a ton of time on that, and it's like, no, like, it literally just created this out of this conversation. There's certain things that I do where, like, it just creates, a system creates a spreadsheet for me as opposed to, like, typing it in. And where some of the AI is going, not just to write bills, but I think about as, like, a pastor, I don't mind, like, having an email done by AI. Frankly, there'd probably be less mistakes. I could send it to Aaron and Aaron would edit it even more. But, like, at what point, like, a sermon by AI or, like, a book by AI, I don't know, like, the book thing is very different because it's like Peter Englert and artificial intelligence. So I guess I'm trying to kind of process, like, even just the plagiarism side of it, because there's definitely, I'm benefiting from some of that, but then there's also this other side where I don't want to put my name to something and have people not trust me that I did it.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, you talk about writing emails or writing books. I mean, also fantastic works of art are also being created by AI. You know, as we speak right now, there's a whole new class of artists that are being developed that are, I would say, not your traditionally trained artists, but they're, you know, it's one of those things where they know what they like and they can kind of, have the AI engine move in a direction to create the art that they like. And so that is another area where, what you talk about, where it's like, who owns it, and was it really created by Peter Englert, or, or how much of it and how much attribution should be given. So I think those are issues, and among a series of ethical issues, some being extremely serious and some being less serious, that are all being debated right now. And one of the cool things about it is, I think we as a society have moved forward quite a bit from, let's say, the 80s, for example, right? And I sort of shudder to think what if AI existed to the extent that it does today in the 80s, what we would do with it, right? Because I think we're less refined and mature as a society. I think, like, right now, for example, there are lots of different groups out there. There's like nonprofit groups that talk about, ethical AI, and really spend a lot of time and a lot of care exploring all the secondary and tertiary impacts of it. But I don't know that I have a great answer to your direct question, or what people would do about it right now. But I think that certainly, at the very least, it's worth a byline that it was a particular work of art, or a particular book was written in conjunction with AI.
So just one quick follow-up to that, because I actually think this is a little bit more practical, and this is kind of the zone that you're in, spreadsheets. So I think there's some boomers that lament that some millennials, why would I create a spreadsheet? I can just have someone else do it. And like in your experience, that tension of the quick fix versus actually like doing the work to kind of master it do you think we're missing something, or is it opening us up to other things, or how do you process? Because I think that's a lot of the medical healthcare field.
Well, and I think it's probably also a good time to sort of explore that in the context of maybe explaining how AI works just a little bit, right? And so the way AI works is you throw tons and tons of data at it, right? So you throw just immense amounts of data. That's why typically in AI, whoever has the most data has the most effective AI, because you've got the most things to compare. So, if I have 5 pictures of Peter Englert, maybe some as a teenager, maybe some as an adult, maybe, with a beard, maybe without a beard.
You don't want that.
Okay, fair enough. But, we can maybe, sort of pick you out of a crowd in one scenario. But if we had 1,000 pictures of Peter Englert, then, maybe we wouldn't want that either. But, we would have a much stronger, algorithm, right? And so, I mean, that's how AI works, is you throw a lot of data at it, and which is why, I mentioned earlier, computing horsepower is like a key enabler to AI, because you need all that to sort of work in conjunction with each other. And so, whether it's writing a book, whether it's creating a spreadsheet, it's really kind of based off of lots of data. What are the best practices? Like, what's considered good? Like, what is something that you're actually, trying to attain versus something that's a false positive or a false negative. And it's sort of refining. And so, to your original question, what's sort of happening is like people are leveling up in terms of, like, if you can make higher level decisions because the lower level decisions are, sort of automated for you, right? It's like anything in life, right? I mean, many of our parents and our grandparents probably drove a stick shift, right? And then the automatic transmission came along, right? And you see some car enthusiasts still driving a stick these days, but more often than not, everyone's driving an automatic, and so no one wants to deal with that anymore. And trust me, we don't have too much of it here, but if you're in a big city and with a lot of traffic, you definitely don't want to be, got to shifting up and down all the time. And so it's sort of the natural evolution of things. Like you don't do the more laborious, smaller tasks, and you kind of offload that. And I think that's kind of what AI is sending us down the path of. And it rubs people the wrong way, right? The folks of us that are have been around a little longer, appreciate the value and of doing things kind of the quote unquote old fashioned way. But people that are younger and newer to the scene don't really see the value of that.
So I guess following up on that a little bit, and thank you for giving a little bit more description of what AI is, or what you throw a lot of data at it, and it has the horsepower to be able to sort through that data, and has algorithms that helps it select the right response. So what separates, besides just maybe it's just more computing power, but what separates AI or deep learning or machine learning or whatever it is that whatever area of AI, what separates that from like kind of what we would consider now basic computing? Like, you can put things into a computer or into a calculator and a response comes back, and hopefully it's the right response. But like, is this just a much more complicated version of that, or is there something more creative about it?
So it's a different approach but at the end of the day, it's an algorithm, right? And an algorithm is an algorithm, whether it's a simple calculator or it's some high-powered piece of AI. The approach that's used for that is going to be different, but at the end of the day, you can loosely classify everything as an algorithm. It's still inputs dictate the output.
Let's move to kind of the spirituality of all of this, because this is kind of, and maybe you can give a little bit more to your story. From what you said, your family didn't grow up Christian. And so how does kind of faith work? Because I think that some people would think you work in AI and you're a Christian, and just that doesn't seem like a great relationship. But I'm not sure if there's any religion out there that would say like, oh yeah, like this works with. So, take us back to your faith journey and kind of how you've engaged this as a follower of Jesus, and how it's kind of shaping the way that you're thinking about it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that any sort of unknown, and I think technology can certainly fit into this category, can sort of be a reflection of your view on God and his sovereignty and the fact that he's in control of things, right? Because I think that at the end of the day, if you fundamentally believe that God is in control and that all things do work together, for his will, it helps you sort of sleep better at night, in the face of uncertainty. And uncertainty can be anything. Uncertainty could be, if you're a student, the test that you have to take tomorrow, or, if you're someone else, of some of the different technology trends that are out there. I think from my perspective, I can say that I was in Silicon Valley earlier this week. And unfortunately, I attended a funeral for a colleague of mine that passed away, unfortunately, way too early. But I got to see a lot of folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis, as well as folks I hadn't seen in over 20 years, right? But it was interesting because it was the first time I'd seen a lot of these people in a chapel, and the number of people that could do simple things like recite the Lord's Prayer, right? So I guess I want to, debunk the myth that, people in technology aren't Christians. There are, there are quite a few of us out there, and we believe that all knowledge is the Lord's knowledge, right? And the one is not mutually exclusive from the other, far from it, right? I think that he has given us a great curiosity and a great set of skills to unlock a lot of mysteries of the universe. And we're certainly doing that with AI. We're doing that with a lot of other things.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think that we've had a few conversations about that too, about in this podcast about, like you said, there's a lot of good people working on technology, and there's a lot of good, I think that was important that we talked about good ways that we can use it, and how I think ministries will use it at some point too, are already using it, really. I'm curious what you think, as someone who's, I know you would say there's probably a lot of engineers and whatnot who they know the nitty gritty of things. But you know a lot, and I really like this conversation. Where do you think AI is heading? And I don't know what. I guess one of the more, when I read the question that we had for this podcast, I think one of those philosophical questions that's out there sometimes. We see it in books, we see it in movies, we see it in do you think, is there at any point can AI develop its own personality or some form of that? I know that we're lumping in a lot of stuff when you say AI, but is there, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? And what do you also think about even people's struggle with that when people are wrestling with that?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to note that God uses all technology for his purposes, right? If you go back in time, right? If I go way back in time, right, to the invention of the alphabet and the invention of paper and the invention of the written word, we can see that, obviously 10 commandments, right? If there's no alphabet, there'd probably be no 10 commandments, right? If there were no roads, which again, people don't think of roads as technology, but the gospel wouldn't have spread in Paul's day, right? You look at what we're doing right now, which is a podcast, which is, being distributed over the internet, right? People thought, smartphones were, something unnatural, right? But it's you can see the good and the bad, right? Technology is a tool, right? Like a lot of things, right? And it can be used for lots of different purposes, but never forget that all technology will be used for God's work, and we should never lose sight of that. To your specific question in terms of where we see kind of AI going, and where do we see kind of a sentient sort of life form? I think right now, again, being that at the core, it's an algorithm, you're always going to get a sort of a copied response. Now you can get very, very sophisticated, right? If I could, duplicate the charm of a Hollywood actor, right? And then I use that to program my AI model, you could probably approximate the charm of, somebody like that, or, the singing voice of somebody that, is got a great voice. So these are all things, but again, the purest ability to not just, take a bunch of data and sort of apply it at the right time because you've kind of recorded it and you've kind of know when to pull out a particular card, is, I think, something still, for as far as I can tell and see into the future, something that is going to be, uniquely human, right? And I call that our soul, right? And that ability, you can approximate spontaneity, but humans are really unpredictable creatures, right? As we know, right? And we're capable of a lot of good and we're capable of a lot of bad. And I dare say that the randomness of the human condition is something that I don't know that I could see AI replicating, certainly not in the immediate future. And again, the differences are going to get finer and finer over time, to the point where it might be, for many people, it might be like, it's almost a don't care difference, right? It's the difference between the real thing and something synthesized is so close. It's close enough to worry me. But I think that at the end of the day, it's something that is a long, long ways away.
So like we talk about human beings. You brought up human beings having a soul, being created in God's image. And so like one of the things that my wife and I have really kind of adopted, I'll give you a bad reason, but also give you a good reason. When we talk to our smart device, we try to be very polite. We never want that smart device to turn on us. That's kind of the, superstitious reason. But then the second reason is, my daughters are listening to us. So, if I tell my smart device, shut up, like they're going to pick that up. So I guess maybe you think that that's kind of crazy, but in your everyday life outside of work, and you think about AI, are there certain practices that as a Christian you would encourage, people to think about? Like, hey, as you talk to your smart device, as you use this, are there any things that you've implemented on a practical level that have really helped you to kind of engage your faith?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we have to realize that, and maybe I'm getting into, U.S. Constitution and Declaration of it, but we are all given God-given rights, right, as human beings, and I think privacy, respect are two very important pieces of it, right? And so I think that anything that you do, and let me say that when we sort of get out of our own little maybe US-centric world of AI, and we realize that there's a kind of a geopolitical element to this as well, right? I mean, what somebody may say, why don't we just throw AI in the garbage can? Well, guess what? There's other countries out there in the world that are engaging very heavily in AI, and there's almost a Cold War going on, right? And so when it comes to some of that stuff, right? And so we have to be very be very aware that, just like we wanted to be the first people to be, to put a man on the moon, right? We also want to make sure that we're keeping up on technology and we're not left behind and, at the mercy of other nations and their use or adoption of the technology. But again, right, there needs to be some element of dignity and respect and love, right? At the end of the day, right? Love is the thing that rules everything else, right? And that goes into this. And I think in general, most people are very respectful of that. But again, not everybody in the world is necessarily going to abide by those rules, and the rules, and that's why again, government regulation and some of these different oversee watchdog groups that are in existence are really, really important to kind of put some boundaries on things. Just like there's international rules of law about chemical warfare and other things, right? Mm-hmm. We have to be mindful of these things.
So I'm thank you for saying all that, and yeah, I don't want us to be too heavy on the worried about, where the technology could be going, because I think there's potentially a lot of great stuff. I mean, there's already great stuff that's happening. I'm curious, you operate both in this space of artificial intelligence as from your business career. You also are very involved in our church, in the church. Have you ever thought, like, how would churches use artificial intelligence in the future? Like, what would that look like? Maybe it wouldn't be called AI. Maybe we're still at a point where that would make people too nervous. But where do you see where it could be helpful?
Sure. I already picture some like acronym PAUL, and it's really some like, gospel oriented AI engine or something like that. But, nice. No, I mean, I think that, AI can be used in a lot of things, right? Actually, Peter mentioned some things earlier, even from like basic communications, right? To the congregation, to helping, with the production on Sunday mornings, right? There's a lot of, things that can be used along the lines of AI. I think, one of the things that I find to be very kind of compelling about AI is like language translation, right? Like, again, if you want to, all of a sudden, right, we have ASL translators, like, on Sunday mornings, right? But imagine if anybody wanted to tune into a Browncroft sermon and be able to listen to it in French or German or, all sorts of different things, right? Like, and really, take the message and remove the shackles of being limited to one language, right? And AI can enable all that really at virtually no cost, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think is a great way to take Browncroft and other churches around the world and expand their platform.
So I'm actually going to answer this question too, but I'm going to ask you first.
Sure.
So that way, what do you think about churches and the metaverse? Because even some of our listeners that might not be coming to church often, and of course our listeners that do, I know it's a little bit different than AI, but I'd just be curious on what your thought, and I'm happy to kind of give mine too. So
yeah, no, I mean, I would love, you probably maybe have more experience in that than I do. I mean, I would simply say that as a church, our mission is to go anywhere that people go, right? And if the people are going into the metaverse, people going into outer space, that's where the church should go, right? It's as simple as that for me. And the more ways you can provide people a entry point into the gospel, that's our mission. And and you can kind of already tell, right? I don't try to overcomplicate things, right? Things are pretty simple, right? Is God in control? If God's in control, then we're going to be fine, right? And God's told us to go out there and make disciples of everyone out there, and that's I think showing up in the metaverse is a good way of doing that.
So just to respond to the pastor I learned the most from social media didn't have social media. So I grew up in Binghamton, New York. The pastor's name was Ron Piedmont, and he in the 1980s was on TV, which was kind of the social media. It was 5 minutes before the Today Show on the NBC affiliate, but he also put ads in the paper, and he didn't like going to pastors groups because they'd be like, Piedmont, why are you doing that? You're making us look bad. And to his point, I would, when I was in college, I'd spend time with him and we'd be out and about, and somebody who never attended the church would be like, hey, Pastor Piedmont, thank you for, praying with me. And he didn't really pray for them specifically. He was there because of that. And I get frustrated because there's even people that ask me, well, why do we do a live stream service? Why do we have a podcast? And I think the way that I've been kind of framing it is, what's church and Christianity going to look like in the next 10 years? And once you want to start down that path, and again, you have to be disciplined. I'm not saying we're going to stop meeting on Sunday morning, go into the metaverse, but are there a contingent of people? And I think even the questions that you're bringing up, is there a day that all of a sudden we find out that there's 8 German families that are watching Browncroft, and we say, hey, stop watching, why don't you plant a church together? Those are some of the things that I don't think we're talking about. I don't know. Aaron, before we throw it to Chase, you can tell me if I'm crazy or not, but
No, I think it's a really interesting conversation. And that, the metaverse is, I think it's another one of those, it's a real thing, and it's growing, and it'll be interesting to see how it grows and how people work and play and talk to each other in it. But it's we'll see too. I think kind of like you were saying earlier with AI, there is a bit of a buzz around it also of people, but I do think that it's something to be thinking about. Okay, if people really are going to engage each other there, or be seeking information there, then how can we be offering information about the gospel, or in connecting people to one another? I think it's kind of getting to maybe a lot of what we've been talking about already is, and I was thinking about this while you were talking, Chayton, is, a lot of the positives here, when we're talking about what's the spiritual significance of AI, there's a lot of the positives of that significance. It seems like it's when you're using this as a tool, when you realize it's a tool to improve learning in the context of your spiritual life, learning about the gospel and sharing the good news, or maybe even you mentioned how it's important in healthcare. Well, it can also be important in relief efforts, maybe, and meeting people's needs, finding out what their needs are quickly, and getting things to them in ways that we couldn't before. And on the other side, there's a lot of the fears that are out there too. But on the positive side, it seems like it's using the tool as a tool. And the metaverse, to me, to answer your question, Peter, it sounds to me like that's where the positive side, if people are there, kind of like Chayton said, then it's a tool to reach, it's a place where you can reach people. Mm-hmm. Tool, maybe that's the wrong word, but I don't know.
No, and I will say, maybe just to kind of comfort people out there, right? I mean, a lot of people think of the metaverse as sort of cutting edge and so forth. And, just like people say art imitates life, I think there's elements to technology that imitate what we know about God, right? I mean, so if you look at like sort of the cutting edge in technology, right? So let's talk about before. Maybe 20 years ago or more, right? People would be walking around with their flip phones, and actually, I loved my Motorola Razr. Wish I still had it. But
can you still T9 text? With all the you had a. Okay. Yeah.
No. I mean, well, that or the BlackBerry. I love the BlackBerry. I'm really dating myself as well. But the point is that there's a transformation that you went from a dumb phone to a smartphone, right? And there's a lot of significance to that, and maybe I overthink it because I straddle these two worlds of faith and technology. But I do sort of view that transformation that occurred with handsets to also be very much akin to the Holy Spirit coming and living with us, because all of a sudden we have way more capability than we had before. And if you look at like sort of the technology landscape, if anyone watches any sort of TV at all, I don't think a commercial break goes by without, one of the cell phone carriers, commercials to be on TV. But this kind of combination of your phone, the network, and the cloud, also another thing that you hear a lot about in terms of television, really kind of mimics the Holy Trinity in many ways, because again, Holy Spirit sort of lives within us. Like if we're the cell phones, the network is the way that we access the cloud. It's through the network that we can get to the cloud, and the cloud sort of in a much smaller scale, an infinitely smaller scale, houses a lot of the data and a lot of the information, from all over the world, right? And so I find it interesting to see these parallels that, behind the metaverse, behind a lot of all this technology, is this architecture, this cutting edge architecture, put in place by human beings that sort of, again, mimics the Holy Trinity in many respects. So I find both promise and a little bit of amusement in that reality.
So, folks, Austin Bush, who I think has done 2 episodes with us, he's in your small group. So, you can talk about the technology side and debate him on the theology side of the Trinity and clouds and stuff. So it's great. Let's do these last 2 questions. So, let's just answer it super directly. Why is there spiritual significance to AI? Just to kind of sum up the episode.
I would say that there's spiritual significance in AI for 2 reasons. Number one, it is a reflection of our faith in terms of who's in control, right? Especially if you're afraid of new technology and AI. And number 2, it is a new technology, like we talked about many others, that God and his people will use for good things.
Wow. You sum that up better than like most pastors would. So the last question that we ask is, what does Jesus have to say about the spiritual significance of AI? So Aaron and I answer that question, and then you get to clean us up. So you're smiling because you knew this was coming, didn't you?
No, actually, what's funny, again, by binge listening to a lot of episodes, I did notice that there's certain patterns that come into play. So yeah, that's okay. My own little AI kicked in.
We have our own algorithm.
Yeah.
No, but this is great. I can't wait to have you out again. So who's going to go first, me or you?
I go if you want to. Yeah.
You're like, listeners, Aaron's more the expert in this than me.
Well, so. No, I mean, Chayton's the expert here.
I
just know enough to be dangerous. But I think it's such a fascinating conversation topic, and I'm sure it's one that will continue to get fleshed out as we go, as we move forward in the years ahead. And what does Jesus think about it? I think Jesus wants us to use technology of any kind to advance the gospel, whether in his in 2,000 years ago, the Roman roads, you mentioned that. Yeah, they used that to get all over the empire and beyond, the Roman Empire and beyond, and bringing the gospel. And they used the tools of their day to be able to write things or to help people. And that's what we're doing today. I do think it is interesting, and maybe this could be one of those areas where Chayton cleans up something I'm about to say, but I think on the spiritual significance side, it could be interesting also to think about what are the struggles that AI maybe uniquely will bring up, and I don't know what they are, for people to spiritually deal with. Like, as far as, I think in any situation, you could start to trust more in the technology than you do in God or something else, or maybe it's not even just trust. Maybe it's seeking relationship with, or I mean, what is that? I'm just really interested to see where this might develop over time. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, Peter, I think Jesus wants us to not be afraid of any of these things, but to use them to know how to better love Him, love God, and love others. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I'm actually going to piggyback on that. One of the things I really appreciate about you, Chayton, is we asked you some fairly direct questions, and you didn't give us direct answers, which is on purpose. You gave us thoughtful answers. And, I think about framing all of this. First of all, I just want to talk about just kind of a theology of technology. So when you talked about Paul, Paul was using the most technological way to communicate he had in that day. So he took scrolls, wrote letters that later became our Bible. That's a whole nother episode. Gutenberg did the same thing. He printed a Bible. I mean, it was crazy to give the Bible to normal people that didn't study it. And so I kind of say all that Christianity historically has always been on the cutting edge of technology to some degree. So we can argue that. But what I appreciate about your thoughtful questions was it comes down to the simple two commands that Jesus gave: love God and love others. So as we kind of process AI, and this is where you brought up sovereignty, this is what you brought up too, are we loving and worshiping God? But I think the second one is actually I wouldn't say the bigger one, but it's the more practical one. And so how are we loving our neighbors in doing this? So, if AI is helping doctors prescribe better medication, and I might not even be using that right, or if AI is used to write a crystal clear email that's going to help someone take a next step, man, that's really loving your neighbors. But if AI is just to promote a product to make more money, and that's really simplistic, then I think that we're missing the point. And I think Jesus is kind of just constantly saying, from 10 or 6,000 years ago to 100 years ago, whatever the technology is, it's the same today. Is it loving God and is it loving others?
First of all, guys, kudos to you for two reasons. One is I don't think I have much to clean up. Number two is everything you guys just said actually just reminded me of that ride at Disney World, Spaceship Earth, where Madam Judi Dench, walks you through the history of technology and mankind. But really, at every step of the way, God wins, right? At every step of the way. And don't ever forget that people will do. I promise you that people will do bad things with AI, and it'll show up on the news. But I promise you, over the long term, more good than bad will come from it. And, if you look at that, not in a isolated case, but in, a bigger time horizon, I am, again, completely convinced of that. And the Lord would not have it any other way.
What a great place to close. Chayton, where's the best place for people to find you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just go to LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Chayton Khona, ChetanKhona. And, that's really the only social media that I really engage in, which is maybe surprising to some. But I know that I've got some old friends from high school that are not happy about me not being part of their Facebook group. But I have no regrets. Sorry, but not sorry.
Oh, my goodness. What a way to close. You can find us at whygetawhypodcast.com. Click the subscribe button. You'll get this episode and many others coming to your email box every single week. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.